Ian Ellington is in the building, someone whispered as the elevator doors slid open. Harper Cline didn't even look up from her laptop. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor of her open-concept startup space, a whiteboard covered in code schematics behind her, and her team scattered around the room, half eating lunch, half debugging. Her curls were tied up in a messy bun, and her sweatshirt had a suspicious coffee stain on the sleeve. She didn't care, not today, not ever, honestly. "He's just here for the tour," she muttered, fingers flying across her keyboard. "Let the suits gawk." But then the room went quiet, too quiet. She sighed, finally lifting her head only to find a tall man in a sharp charcoal suit standing just a few feet from her, his hands casually in his pockets, a curious smile on his face. He had dark hair, neatly styled, a strong jawline, piercing green eyes, and the kind of presence that made everyone forget how to breathe for a second. Harper blinked. "You must be Ian." "I must be," he said, glancing at the chaotic workspace with amusement. "And you must be the one running this operation." She stood, brushing imaginary dust from her jeans. "I'm Harper, founder, CTO, CEO, janitor when necessary." That made him laugh, a real, unfiltered laugh. Multitasking. "I like that. Let's be honest," she said, motioning for him to follow her through the space. "You're only here because your firm is thinking about investing. You want to see if we're real or just another app with a slick pitch deck." He followed her past whiteboards, a wall of sticky notes, and a couch that had definitely seen better days. "I've seen a lot of startups," he said. "Your numbers caught my interest. But this," he gestured around, "this is more than I expected." "Messier than expected?" she asked. "Better," he said simply. She glanced at him, surprised. Ian Ellington was a billionaire, founder of one of the largest tech investment firms on the West Coast. Known for being ruthless, brilliant, and impossible to impress, and yet here he was genuinely curious, genuinely watching her. "That's our prototype," she said, nodding at a table covered in wires and screens. "Real-time virtual collaboration for remote product dev teams. We've got 5 paying clients, small ones, but they're growing." He nodded, picking up a tablet and testing the interface. "You built this, me and a team of 5 who haven't slept properly in 3 months. He looked around again. "This is the most authentic setup I've seen in a while. Everyone's actually working. I don't believe in ping-pong tables," she said. "I believe in shipping product." Ian raised an eyebrow. "You're intense." "I'm efficient." He smiled at that. By the time the tour ended, Harper was trying very hard not to like him. Which was hard, because he was smart. He asked the right questions, pointed out gaps in the product strategy without sounding arrogant, and actually listened when she answered. But she didn't have time to get distracted, especially not by someone like him. "So," she said, crossing her arms as they returned to the front of the office, "did we pass the billionaire sniff test?" He met her eyes. "You passed something." That made her blink. She opened her mouth to fire back something sarcastic, but he was already turning toward the door. "I'll be in touch," he said, and then he was gone. 2 days later, Harper walked into her office and froze. There was a box on her desk, black, matte, no label. Cautiously, she opened it. Inside was a sleek silver laptop, top of the line, better than anything they could afford. Along with a note: "For the woman who built a company with 5-year-old tech and still made it brilliant, thought you deserved one that doesn't overheat every 4 hours. Ian. Harper stared at the note for a full minute, then she crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. "Hey," her lead engineer said, walking in. "Is that the new Phantom Book X? We've been trying to get one for weeks." "It's nothing," Harper muttered, slamming the lid shut, but it wasn't nothing. Because later that night, when the office was empty and the city lights glowed outside the windows, she opened the box again and turned it on. A week passed. Then 10 days. Harper didn't hear from Ian again. No more gifts, no emails, nothing, which was fine, really. Until she walked into a networking event downtown and nearly choked on her wine, because there he was, Ian Ellington, standing across the rooftop terrace in a black suit, surrounded by investors and founders, looking like he owned the skyline. Which, technically, he probably did. He saw her. And smiled. She looked away, but 5 minutes later he was beside her. "I didn't think I'd see you here," he said, offering her a drink. "I didn't think billionaires showed up to these things without a red carpet." He laughed. I came to see someone. Oh yeah, who you? She blinked. Why? Because I can't stop thinking about you. Her heart did something stupid in her chest. You don't even know me. I know you built something incredible from nothing. I know you speak your mind and don't care what people think. I know you look at problems like puzzles and you don't stop until you solve them. She stared at him. And I know, he added softer now, that I haven't stopped thinking about you since I walked out of your office. Harper swallowed. This is a bad idea. Why? Because you're you. And I'm just trying to keep my company alive. You're not just anything, he said. And I'm not trying to get in your way, I just want to get to know you. She looked at him. Really looked. And for once, she didn't have a comeback. That night, he walked her to her car. And when he opened the door for her, she paused. You're not what I expected, she said. He smiled. Neither are you. Then she got in and drove off, but she was still smiling all the way home. Harper didn't expect to see Ian again so soon, let alone in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon at the Community Innovation Lab in Soma. She was seated at a long table strewn with soldering kits and circuit boards, working beside a nonprofit founder building low-cost tech for underfunded schools. The lab wasn't glamorous fluorescent lighting, creaky stools, and the faint scent of burnt plastic, but it was her favorite place to clear her head. He walked in like he belonged there. No entourage, no announcement. Just a navy coat slung over one shoulder and a paper cup of coffee in his hand. You're not stalking me, are you? Harper asked, not looking up from the microcontroller she was wiring. If I were, I'd be failing miserably. You're impossible to keep track of. You Googled me. He took a seat across from her. I made a few calls, figures. You didn't respond to the email I didn't send. Harper set down her tools and leveled her gaze at him. You want something? Yes, he said without hesitation. Dinner. She tilted her head. Business or personal? I'm not here to pitch. Then you're here to distract me. Is it working? Not even close. Ian grinned, easy, confident, but not arrogant. You're working on educational hardware. I volunteer here twice a month. Keeps me grounded. Your company's in the middle of a funding round. You could be networking, pitching. Instead, you're here with a soldering iron. I know what matters. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. That's why I keep showing up. Harper studied him, her fingers still on the circuit board. I don't have time to entertain some billionaire who's bored with his usual crowd. I haven't been bored a minute since I met you. Her jaw tightened. You think this is charming, don't you? Showing up unannounced, tossing compliments like confetti. No, he said, his tone shifting. I think it's honest, and I think you're used to people underestimating you. That's not me. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she picked up the microcontroller again and adjusted a wire. The silence stretched until she finally said, There's a Vietnamese place around the corner. Tiny, no press, cash only. I'll meet you there at 7. Don't be late. That evening, Harper beat him to the restaurant. She sat at a corner table near the window, nursing a cup of jasmine tea. When Ian arrived, he was dressed down in a slate gray sweater and dark jeans, still polished, still unmistakably him. But less guarded than before, he slid into the seat across from her. You look different outside of a tech lab. You look the same, she replied, handing him a menu. Predictable, expensive. He laughed, then set the menu aside. Order for me, surprise me. She raised an eyebrow. That's risky. I like risk. True to her word, Harper ordered in fluent Vietnamese, not even glancing at the laminated menu. Ian watched her, intrigued. You grew up in the Bay, East Oakland, single mom. She worked nights at the hospital. I learned how to fix things because we couldn't afford to replace them. He nodded, quiet now. What about you? She asked. Connecticut, boarding school, summer internships in Manhattan. I was supposed to be a lawyer. What changed? I got tired of watching people build things while I just filed the paperwork. Let me guess. You launched a startup that sold for millions before you turned 25. Close. Sold at 27. Used the money to start my firm. Any regrets? He hesitated. A few. Their food arrived steaming bowls of spicy noodles and grilled skewers. Harper dug in without ceremony and Ian followed suit. Why me? She asked after a few bites. I've met founders who talk a lot. You don't. You just build. You don't pitch, you prove. That's rare. That's business, she said. You said this wasn't business. It's not, but it's why I noticed you. She set her chopsticks down. And now, Now I want to stop wondering what it would be like if I didn't just walk away that day. The air between them shifted. She could feel it. He wasn't just charming now, he was being real. It unsettled her more than anything else had. I don't trust easily, she said quietly. You don't have to, yet. She looked past him, toward the street outside, the glow of the city muted by the restaurant's fogged windows. Then back at him. You're not like the others. I've been called worse. You're not scared of rejection. I've faced worse. Their eyes locked and something wordless passed between them. Not a confession, not a promise, just possibility. When the bill came, Ian reached for it without hesitation. I said cash only, Harper said. I came prepared. She watched him pull out a money clip, sleek, simple silver, and hand over folded bills without blinking. The total was more than most people would spend on dinner for two at a dive, but he didn't flinch. Outside, the wind had picked up. Harper pulled her coat tighter as they walked. Want me to call you a car? Ian asked. She shook her head. I'm 2 blocks away, he nodded, then paused. Can I walk you? She considered it, then started down the sidewalk. He fell in step beside her. They didn't speak much during the walk. Just the sound of footsteps, occasional passing cars, and the distant hum of the city. At her building, she turned to him. This doesn't mean anything, I know. I still need space. I'll give it. But I'll let you know if I change my mind. He didn't push, didn't ask when. Just nodded once, slowly. Then he stepped back, hands in his coat pockets. Good night, Harper. She watched him disappear into the dark, her breath curling in the cold air. And for the first time in months, she felt the equilibrium she'd fought so hard to keep tilt. The next time Harper saw Ian, it wasn't planned. She was sitting in the back row of a panel discussion at a downtown accelerator, half listening to a founder pitch a new AI tool, half reviewing a contract on her phone when his voice cut through the din. Ian Ellington, Ellington Ventures. He was asking a question, clear, direct, cutting through the fluff like a scalpel. What's your customer acquisition cost and how fast are you burning through your seed round? She didn't need to look up to know it was him, but she did anyway. He stood near the moderator in a tailored black jacket with no tie, his hands relaxed at his sides, his stare fixed on the founder onstage. He wasn't being aggressive, he was being precise. And people were listening. Harper didn't wave, didn't nod. Just waited until the session ended and slipped out the side door. She didn't expect him to follow. Are you avoiding me or just allergic to panels? She turned, already halfway down the hallway. Do I look like I enjoy hour-long pitch parades? I figured you'd be on that stage by now. I don't need applause to build something real. I know, he said, but the right kind of attention doesn't hurt. She crossed her arms. What do you want? I have a place in Napa. There's a private event this weekend. Investors, founders, no press, just real conversations. I want you to come. You're inviting me to a vineyard retreat. I'm inviting you to a table everyone else keeps trying to push you away from. Why? Because you belong there. Harper hesitated. I can't be bought with wine and sunsets. Good, he said, because there's also terrible cell service and a lot of awkward small talk. She narrowed her eyes. If this is another pitch disguised as a weekend getaway, it's not. I've already told you I'm not here to invest in your company. Then stop circling me like you are. I'm not circling, he said. I'm waiting for you to stop running. She stared at him, pulse ticking in her throat. I'll send a car, he added. If you don't come, I'll assume you're still building walls. If you do. He didn't finish the sentence, just looked at her like he was already imagining what might happen if she said yes. He walked away before she could answer. That Friday, Harper stood in front of the minimalist black SUV parked outside her apartment, suitcase in hand, heart thudding in her chest. She hadn't told anyone on her team where she was going. Hadn't told herself why she'd agreed. The drive to Napa was quiet, no music. Just vineyards rolling past the windows and the steady hum of the road. When they arrived, Harper stepped out into a sun-drenched courtyard surrounded by glass and stone. The house wasn't ostentatious, but it was clearly worth more than everything she'd ever owned combined. The kind of place that whispered power instead of shouting it. Ian was waiting near the edge of the terrace, sleeves rolled up, a bottle of wine already open. You came. I want full credit for not bolting the second I saw the valet. You'll get it. She followed him inside, where a few guests were already mingling. No one wore name tags. No one needed introductions. These were the kinds of people who closed funding rounds with a phone call. Ian handed her a glass of white wine. There's a dinner at 7. Until then, pick any seat, jump into any conversation, or don't. There's a lake behind the ridge if you want quiet. She took a sip, studied him over the rim of her glass. You really invited me here just to let me wander. I invited you here because I wanted you to see that you can walk into any room, even this one, and not have to prove anything. And you think I don't already know that. I think you're still trying to convince yourself. The words hit harder than she expected. Later, Harper didn't go to the lake or the conversation pit where two VCs were debating revenue models for clean energy startups. Instead, she found a quiet corner near the garden and sat beneath a tree overlooking the vineyards. She didn't hear footsteps, but she felt when Ian sat beside her. You always disappear when it gets too loud, he said. I'm not interested in posturing, neither am I. They sat in silence for a moment, the sun casting long golden shadows across the fields. He glanced at her. I ran my first company into the ground. She turned to look at him. No one talks about it, he continued, because I buried it fast and I had enough capital to pivot, but I tanked it, chased the wrong market, hired the wrong people. I thought I was untouchable. Why are you telling me this? Because you think you have to be perfect to earn a seat at the table. But no one got here without bleeding for it. She didn't respond immediately, just let the wind filter through the silence. I was 19 when I built my first app, she finally said. It crashed every 3 hours, and I sold it for $1,000 because I needed to pay rent. He smiled slightly. You built your first product before most people know how to code. I never forgot what it felt like to sell something I knew was worth 10 times more. Maybe that's why you don't sell anything short anymore, her breath caught. I'm not trying to fix you, he said. I just want to understand you. I don't know how to let anyone do that. Then we start here. He didn't reach for her hand, didn't touch her at all, just sat beside her like he was willing to wait as long as it took. At dinner, Harper sat across from a woman who'd just IPO'd her biotech company and beside a man who'd built a payment platform used by half the country. No one interrupted her. No one dismissed her. Ian didn't hover, didn't steer conversations, didn't try to control the narrative. He just let her be seen, and when the night ended and she stood alone on the terrace staring out at the stars brushing the tops of the vines, she heard his voice behind her. Do you regret coming? She turned. No, he stepped closer. Then stay. Her heart skipped. For the night, for the morning after. She looked at him, really looked, and this time she didn't run. Harper woke to the sound of birds outside the open balcony doors and the scent of something warm drifting through the vineyard air. It wasn't her bed, but it didn't feel foreign either. The linens were soft, the light golden. She sat up slowly, her fingers brushing over the edge of the down comforter. She found her jeans and sweater folded neatly on a chaise by the window. Her suitcase sat beside it, untouched. Someone had brought it in without disturbing her, and she had a feeling she knew who. Downstairs, she followed the smell of coffee to the sun-drenched kitchen. Ian stood at the stove, barefoot, sleeves rolled up, whisking eggs into a pan like he did it every morning. He didn't look over his shoulder when he heard her steps. He just reached for 2 plates. I guessed you'd be up early. I didn't know you cooked. I don't, he said, setting her plate on the marble counter, but I watched my chef make this once. Figured I could replicate it. She took a bite, then blinked. This is actually good. He leaned against the counter, watching her. You always look at food like you expect it to disappoint you. Food's expensive when you're broke. You learn not to get attached. He didn't argue. Just poured her a cup of coffee and slid it across the counter. I'm heading back this afternoon, she said after a few quiet sips. I know. I've got a pitch to finish. There's a meeting with a potential strategic partner. And I need to follow up on our latest beta test. I'm not asking you to stay, she met his eyes, but I want to see you again, not at panel, not at a retreat, just you, she hesitated. There's not a lot of room in my life for anything unstable. I'm not unstable, Harper. No. But this, she looked around the open-plan kitchen, the stunning view beyond the windows. This feels like something out of someone else's life. He stepped closer but didn't touch her. Then let me show you how it can be part of yours. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at it. A reminder about her meeting in 3 hours. She had to leave soon. Harper set down her fork. I want you to invest. Ian's brow lifted. Since when? Since I realized I don't want to keep fighting for scraps when I've built something that deserves scale. I'm not asking for a favor. I'm asking for a partner who won't try to take it from me. He nodded slowly. Terms? You don't get a seat on the board. You don't get a say in the product. You get equity and access. Nothing else. That's not how I usually do deals. Then don't treat it like a deal. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, without breaking eye contact, he reached into a drawer by the fridge, pulled out a folded piece of paper and laid it on the counter. She opened it. It was a term sheet, already drafted, already signed. I had a feeling, he said, you'd come around. I didn't want to show it to you until you were ready. You were that sure of me. I wasn't sure of anything. I just wanted to be ready when you were. Harper studied the numbers. They were fair, more than fair. She pushed the paper back toward him. I'll have my lawyer review it, of course. They stood in silence, the sun pouring across the counter between them. I meant what I said, Ian added. This isn't about control. It's about believing in you. She nodded, then picked up her phone and shoulder bag. I'll call you, she said. I'll wait. Back in the city, Harper threw herself into work. The pitch became a full presentation. The beta test turned into a full launch schedule. And 3 days later, the strategic partner signed on with a 6-month contract that gave her team the validation they needed. But Ian didn't call. He didn't send more gifts, didn't show up at her office. He kept his word. He waited until the night of her product launch. Harper hadn't invited him. The event was small, just her team, a few early clients and some close friends. They'd booked the rooftop of a modest hotel downtown, nothing flashy. But to her, it felt like Everest. She stood in front of her team, champagne in hand. Her voice shook as she thanked them, and her hands trembled when she mentioned the long nights and the close calls. But when she raised her glass, the cheers were real. She stepped away from the crowd, needing air, and found herself alone by the railing. I thought you didn't do parties, a voice said behind her. She turned and there he was, dark suit, no tie, a single white rose in his hand. I didn't see you come in. I asked your co-founder to sneak me past the front. I didn't want to steal your spotlight. You think I'd let you, he smiled. No, but I didn't want to risk it. Harper took the rose. What's this for? For the woman who built something no one else could. She looked at the flower, then back at him. You're late. I wanted to be sure you didn't need saving. I don't. I know. That's why I'm here. She exhaled slowly, the tension she hadn't realized she was carrying finally leaving her shoulders. I signed the term sheet. I know. I got the countersign this morning. You didn't say anything. I didn't want to make it about the money. She stepped toward him. Then what do you want to make it about? He didn't hesitate. You, us. Whatever this becomes. You're not afraid I'll shut you out again. I'm terrified, he said, but I'm more afraid of not trying. She laughed soft and unexpected, then she leaned in and kissed him. Not a tentative kiss, not a polite one, but a real one, the kind that felt like a beginning. When they finally pulled apart, she whispered, I don't know what this becomes either. Then we figure it out. The music drifted up from the party behind them. Harper rested her head lightly against his shoulder, the rose still in her hand. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to prove anything. She just felt seen, and finally open to being loved. The first time Harper brought Ian to her office after the launch, she watched him with narrowed eyes as he stepped through the glass doors like he already belonged there. This isn't a boardroom, she warned as he surveyed the space. I noticed, he said, glancing at a desk held together with duct tape and a chair someone had clearly salvaged from a sidewalk. But I like it. Feels honest. Her team tried not to stare, but it was impossible. Ian Ellington wasn't just a name anymore. He was the man who'd backed them when no one else would. The man who'd written a check without demanding to take the wheel. She led him toward a corner workstation and nodded at the monitor. We pushed a new feature live this morning. Want to give it a run? He didn't hesitate. Only if you tell me what part you wrote. She leaned over his shoulder, typing a sequence of commands. This module. It recalibrates interaction latency between remote collaborators. I built it last week at 3 a.m. He looked up at her. You still code at 3 a.m. I still think best when the city's asleep. He watched the simulation launch, but his attention drifted back to her. "You've changed." "I haven't, you have," he said. "You don't look like you're carrying the whole world anymore." She stepped back, crossing her arms. "That's because I'm not carrying it alone." They didn't talk about what that meant. They didn't have to. Later that week, Ian took her to a charity gala at the Fairmont, an event she would have once made up an excuse to avoid. But now, things were different. She wore a black off-the-shoulder dress that she'd almost returned twice before finally deciding to own it. When she walked into the ballroom on Ian's arm, the buzz around them was instant. "There's no press tonight," he said quietly, his hand resting lightly against the small of her back. "No announcements. I'm not here to be paraded around," she replied. "You're here because I wanted to stand beside you somewhere lit by chandeliers for once, not just whiteboards." She glanced up at him. "That's dangerously close to romantic." He leaned closer. "I'm full of dangerous ideas." Over dinner, she found herself seated between a venture capitalist from Singapore and a fashion CEO who wanted to talk about wearable tech. Ian didn't try to pull her into his conversations or keep her tethered to his side. He let her shine. Later, as they stepped onto the balcony to escape the crowd, she pulled off her heels and leaned against the railing, looking down at the glittering city. "You're quiet," he said. "I've been thinking about." She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "I spent so long trying to stay invisible. Now I feel like every room I walk into is watching me." "Do you want to disappear again?" "No," she said. "I want to choose who sees me." He brushed a loose curl from her cheek. "I see you. I know." Her voice cracked slightly and she hated that it did, but he didn't tease her. He just stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her, holding her like he wasn't afraid of the cracks. Back at her apartment, she didn't ask him to leave. She also didn't make a big deal of him staying. He made coffee the next morning without asking where anything was, and when she found him on her tiny balcony reading a report on her latest metrics, she sat beside him and rested her head on his shoulder. "This is new," she said. "Comfortable, scary, good," he said. "It should be." The next month passed in a blur of progress and growth. Her team expanded, their client list doubled. She hired her first full-time marketing lead and moved out of the coworking space into a small loft with enough room to breathe. Ian didn't show up with flowers or expensive watches. He showed up with insight, focus, and time. One night, after a late dinner at a quiet jazz bar tucked behind Market Street, he walked her home and paused outside her door. "I have something to ask you," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "If this is another offer to fly me to Tokyo for a casual summit, I'm still going to say no." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, curved velvet box. Her breath hitched. "I'm not asking you to marry me," he said. "Not yet," she blinked. "You're not yet," he repeated. "I'm asking you to build a life with me, not just meetings and launches and rooftop galas, the mornings after, the arguments, the real stuff." She opened the box. Inside was a simple gold ring, no diamond, just a delicate engraving on the inside. It read, "No spotlight, just us." She closed the box slowly. "You waited until I didn't need saving. I waited until I knew you'd never let me." She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him like she wasn't afraid of anything anymore. "I'm in," she whispered. "For all of it." They moved in together 2 weeks later into a penthouse that straddled both their worlds, his floor-to-ceiling windows and her second-hand coffee table. He kept his firm. She scaled her company. They learned to argue without breaking, to compromise without folding. He brought her breakfast on days she forgot to eat. She brought him down to earth when he started thinking in global acquisitions instead of human hours. One Saturday, a year after the gala, Harper stood in front of a room full of new founders, delivering a keynote about the power of building instead of pitching. Ian sat in the back, feet crossed, watching her like she was still the woman who made him forget how to breathe in a crowded, coworking space. Afterward, she found him by the exit. "You looked proud," she said. "I am. You looked like you were going to say something. I was thinking about what you said, about choosing who gets to see you. And I'm the luckiest man alive that you chose me." That night, they danced barefoot in their living room to an old record. No gala, no photographers. Just them, wrapped in candlelight and quiet laughter. When he eventually did propose, it was on a Tuesday. No grand gesture. No rooftop, Just a quiet moment on their couch, her head in his lap. A ring slipped onto her finger while she was halfway through a sentence about server load. "I love you," he said simply. She looked at the ring, then at him. "That's it. That's everything." She kissed him long and slow. Then yes. They were married in the garden behind their home the following spring. No press, no investors, just the people who mattered. And Harper, finally, didn't feel like she had to prove a thing. Because she'd already won. She had love, she had him. And she had herself.